Eternal Symphony. A love story across time. Prelude. The Celestial Chamber. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, beyond the veil of human perception, the celestial chamber glowed with otherworldly light. Here, the council of ether beings convened, their forms shifting like smoke illuminated by starlight. Elder Zora's form pulsed with deep indigo light as she addressed the council, her voice resonating like the deepest notes of a cosmic organ. The cycle continues, she intoned, her essence expanding with each word. Two of our most gifted have once again incarnated. Their souls dance around each other like binary stars, forever in orbit, yet never colliding. 3 cycles now, added Nexus, his crystalline form pulsing with azure luminescence. He moved in a slow circle, leaving trails of light that formed complex harmonic patterns in the ether. In the first, they created music that moved mortal hearts to tears. In the second, they revolutionized harmony itself. Yet still, they resist the confluence that would complete their cosmic symphony. Lyra drifted forward, her essence shimmering like gossamer threads woven with starlight. They fear, she said softly, her voice like wind through celestial chimes. They fear the power of their union, the raw creation it would unleash. The universe shifts in anticipation when they merely stand near one another. They sense this, even through the veil of mortality. Mortals often fear what they cannot comprehend. Elder Zora's form expanded, filling the chamber with ribbons of deep purple energy. This time, she pronounced, her voice echoing through dimensions, we shall witness their recognition. The veil between worlds grows thin with each cycle. The bloodline must continue, or the bridge between realms will weaken. Already, the music of the spheres grows faint in mortal ears. A younger entity, barely formed and still learning to maintain coherence, pulsed with curious light. And should they finally unite? The young one asked, its voice bright and inquisitive. Elder Zora enveloped the younger being in tendrils of gentle light. Then, little one, she replied, her energy warming, the music of the spheres shall have new composers, and the children born of their union will see beyond the mortal coil. Into the very fabric of existence itself. The forgotten language of creation will once again be spoken in the mortal realm. Is that not dangerous? The young one pressed. To give such power to those bound by flesh. All creation carries risk, Nexus answered, his form contracting thoughtfully. But these two, they carry our essence in perfect balance. They will remember, in time. Movement 1. New Orleans, 1832. The night air hung thick with humidity as Elijah Montgomery's fingers danced across ivory keys. The small salon was filled with New Orleans elite, though few truly appreciated the revolutionary nature of his compositions. As a free man of color in 1832, his very presence at the piano was radical enough. Elijah's mind wandered as he played, his fingers finding notes he had never consciously composed. Where did these melodies come from? He wondered, not for the first time. It's as though they already exist somewhere, waiting to be discovered rather than created. Strange blue light flickered at the corners of his vision, but when he turned to look, there was only candlelight reflecting off polished surfaces. These visions had plagued, or perhaps blessed, him since childhood. His grandmother had called it, the sight, and warned him never to speak of it. Across the room, Josephine Laurent adjusted her cello, her heart racing at the approaching duet. Born in Saint-Domingue before the Revolution, she had fled to New Orleans as a child, her musical gift her only constant companion. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tightened her bow. Why am I nervous? She chided herself. I've performed 100 times before more intimidating audiences. Yet something about tonight, about this particular performance with this particular pianist, filled her with an anticipation she could not name. Last night, she had dreamed of him again, the dark-eyed man who played music that seemed to pull at the stars. In her dreams, they played together in a grand hall filled with light beings, their music creating patterns in the air that rearranged the very fabric of reality. She had awakened with tears on her cheeks and melodies in her mind that she'd never heard before. Miss Laurent, Elijah nodded formally as she took her seat beside him. Shall we begin? Something electric passed between them as their eyes met. Josephine's breath caught in her throat, a fragment of memory, a dream perhaps, of stars and cosmic music. For a moment, she saw not a man in formal attire but a being wreathed in blue flame, whose eyes held the wisdom of eons. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. I believe we've been waiting quite long enough. Their performance began, a piece of Elijah's own composition. As they played, the room seemed to fade away. Blue tendrils of energy, invisible to other guests, swirled around their instruments, connecting them. With each note, the veil between worlds thinned. Elijah felt it, a presence, a connection. As though he and Josephine had played this duet 1,000 times before. His fingers found keys he hadn't intended to play, yet somehow knew were right. The music transformed, becoming something beyond what he had written. Josephine closed her eyes, giving herself over to the strange sensation. Her bow moved as if guided by an unseen hand, drawing sounds from her cello that she had never created before. In her mind's eye, she saw a vast chamber filled with light, and beings who watched with expectation. In the celestial chamber, Elder Zora watched with anticipation. See how their souls reach for one another, even as their mortal forms remain distant. The music draws forth their true essence. The timing is not yet right, Nexus observed, his form contracting with concern. Society's chains bind them still. The mortal world restricts their union with invisible walls as strong as any prison. And yet, Lyra added, this is the closest they have come. Watch how the ether responds to their harmony. Around them, the cosmic chamber resonated with the music rising from earth, colors shifting and flowing in response to each note played by the unsuspecting musicians. Elijah and Josephine played the final notes, the audience erupting in applause. Later, in the garden, they spoke alone for the first time. Your music, Josephine said, plucking nervously at a rose blossom, it feels like a memory I've carried all my life. As though I've always known it, waiting to be remembered rather than learned. Elijah looked at her with wonder, the moonlight casting silver shadows across her face. I composed it in dreams, he admitted, voice low. Dreams where I saw impossible things. She stepped closer, drawn by words that echoed her own experience. What things? Stars singing, beings of light. And you, his voice dropped to a whisper. Always you, though we've never met before tonight, your face is as familiar to me as my own reflection. Josephine's hand trembled as she reached toward him, but stopped short, propriety and fear holding her back. Mr. Montgomery, we cannot. These feelings, these connections, they frighten me. And the world would never allow it. I know, he replied, his voice heavy with resignation. But I shall carry the memory of this night through all my days. Perhaps in another life, another time. Their eyes met once more, and in that moment, they both saw clearly, blue energy connecting them, a glimpse of their true forms behind the mortal facade. Both stepped back, startled and afraid of what they had witnessed. "Goodbye, Miss Laurent," Elijah said formally, though his eyes burned with unspoken emotion. "Farewell, Mr. Montgomery," she replied, curtsying slightly. "May your music continue to remember what we cannot." Little did they know how prophetic those words would be. 2 weeks later, Josephine would board a ship to Paris to study with the masters, fleeing not just New Orleans but the unsettling connection she had felt. Elijah would remain, his compositions growing more haunting, more otherworldly, each one a letter to a woman who would never return. They would not meet again in that lifetime. In her cabin aboard the ship to France, Josephine wrote in her journal, "I dream of him still. Not as the man I met, but as something else, something ancient and powerful. When I close my eyes, I see tendrils of blue light connecting us across the ocean. I fear I am going mad, yet these visions feel more real than the world around me. What are we to each other, across time and space? And why does the thought of our connection fill me with such terrible fear and wonderful hope?" In New Orleans, Elijah composed by candlelight, writing a symphony he titled, "Across Oceans." In the margins of the score, he scribbled, "I feel her still, across the waters. In quiet moments, I hear her cello answering my piano. Something lies between us, something beyond mortal understanding. Perhaps it is better that she left. The blue light grows stronger when we are together, and I fear what might happen should we fully surrender to its pull." In the celestial chamber, Lyra sighed, her form dimming with disappointment. So close, the recognition was there, but the fear was stronger. "Patience," counseled Elder Zora. "Their souls are eternal. The dance continues. Each cycle brings them closer to remembrance. And the music they create in separation," Nexus observed, "it carries the longing of their souls. Listen, even now it changes the harmonics of the mortal realm." Around them, the cosmic symphony shifted subtly, new notes woven into its eternal fabric, notes of yearning, of almost remembrance, of love deferred but never forgotten. Movement 2. Harlem, 1925. The Cotton Club pulsed with energy as Marcus Rivers commanded the stage, his trumpet wailing notes that made the white audience forget, if only for a moment, their prejudices. The jazz age was in full swing, and Marcus, born of the South but tempered in New York's crucible, was its emerging prince. As he played, Marcus felt the familiar sensation, blue light at the edges of his vision, ghostly melodies whispering beneath the notes he produced. Since childhood, these visions had visited him, most often in dreams but increasingly while awake. His grandmother had called him, touched by spirits, but Marcus knew it was something else, something he could almost, but never quite, remember. Tonight it's stronger than ever, he thought, as his solo reached its crescendo. Like something's trying to break through. At the piano sat Beatrice B. Wilson, her fingers a blur over the keys. Classically trained but drawn to the freedom of jazz, she was one of the few women instrumentalists tolerated in the club's house band. Her husband, a banker who disapproved of her performing but enjoyed the extra income, watched from a corner table, his expression a mixture of pride and disapproval. B felt the familiar headache building, the one that always came with the strange flashes of light, the half-remembered melodies that seemed to come from nowhere. Since girlhood, she'd had dreams of playing another instrument, a cello, in a grand salon, wearing clothes from another century. Her mother had blamed her vivid imagination and too many novels. "Take it home, B," Marcus called over the music, and she launched into a solo that silenced the room with its complexity and soul. As her fingers struck the keys, something electric passed between them, a recognition, a remembrance. For a moment, Marcus saw not Bea but another woman, in old-fashioned dress, playing a cello with the same passionate expression. The blue light intensified, connecting them across the stage. In the celestial chamber, Nexus observed with satisfaction. Their music evolves, as does the world around them. The rhythms of this era better suit their cosmic origins. The veil thins during improvisation. When they create in the moment, they draw closer to their true nature. Yes, agreed Elder Zora, but observe how they still orbit each other, never quite acknowledging the pull. The mortal restraints have changed form but remain just as binding. This cycle brings recognition earlier, noted Lyra. They sense each other's true nature already. Progress, however slow. After the set, Marcus found Bea in the alley behind the club, smoking a cigarette. Her husband had left early, a business meeting in the morning, he'd said. "You played like you were possessed tonight," Marcus said, leaning against the brick wall, keeping a respectful distance. "Maybe I was," she replied, her smile enigmatic in the dim light. "Sometimes I feel like the music comes from somewhere else." Somewhere. Before, she hesitated, then added, "You ever feel that way? Like you're remembering rather than creating?" Marcus stared at her, a shiver running down his spine. He'd never spoken of his visions to anyone, afraid they'd think him mad. "I have dreams," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out unbidden. "Dreams of playing music in a place that ain't New Orleans, ain't New York. Somewhere with gas lamps and fancy folks in old-fashioned clothes." Bea dropped her cigarette, crushing it under her heel, her heart racing. "And a woman with a cello." The air between them crackled with recognition. Blue tendrils of light, visible only to them, stretched between their bodies. "How did you know that?" Marcus whispered, taking an involuntary step closer. "Because I dream of her too. Only, she's me. Or I'm her. I don't know which." Bea's voice trembled. "And there's always a man at the piano. A man with your eyes, Marcus." They stood in silence, the weight of implications too heavy to voice. In their minds, both saw flashes of another life, of a garden conversation under moonlight, of a connection severed too soon. "Sometimes," Marcus said softly, "when we play together, I see blue light connecting us. Like we're something else. Something more than what we appear to be." "I see it too," Bea confessed. "I thought I was losing my mind." "What does it mean?" Marcus asked, taking another step toward her. Bea backed away, her face a mask of conflict. "My husband wouldn't understand," she said finally, the wedding band on her finger catching the light. "And this world wouldn't let us be, even if we were free. A colored man and woman making music together is one thing. Anything more," she trailed off, the unspoken dangers hanging in the air between them. Marcus nodded, understanding all too well the restrictions placed upon them, both as black musicians in a white establishment and as man and woman in a society that would punish any violation of its rigid codes. "Maybe in another life, Bea. One where we aren't bound by so much." "Maybe," she echoed, though both felt the profound loss of possibility. "But we'll always have the music. When we play together, it's the closest I've ever come to feeling whole." That night, in their separate beds, Bea beside her slumbering husband, Marcus in his small Harlem apartment, both dreamed of the celestial chamber. of beings made of light who watched them with expectation and disappointment. Both awoke with tears on their cheeks, reaching for something, someone, who wasn't there. In his notebook, Marcus wrote, "The dreams grow stronger. Last night, I saw her, not as B, but as she might be without the constraints of this world, this time. Her soul shone through her skin like light through paper. We played music that created worlds." What are these visions, memories, premonitions, or simply the desperate wishes of a heart that recognized its other half too late, in a world too cruel to allow our union? In her private diary, hidden beneath false drawer bottom, B wrote, "The blue light came again in dreams." M was there, but not as himself, as something greater, something eternal. We stood among stars that sang, among beings who called us their children. What a strange fancy, yet even now, awake and writing by lamplight, I feel the truth of it in my bones. There is something between us that transcends this life, this time. Something that will outlast even death itself. But for now, I must be content with our music, the only place where our souls can touch freely. In the celestial chamber, Lyra shook her head. Again, they retreat. The fear is too great, though different in nature from the previous cycle. The recognition grows stronger, Elder Zora noted. The veil thins with each cycle. The music they create together carries more of our essence than ever before. This is not failure but evolution. The next convergence will be different. Must we wait another full cycle? Asked the younger entity. Time moves differently for us than for them, Nexus reminded gently. What seems an eternity to them is but a moment in our existence. Their souls mature with each incarnation. Patience. Around them, the music of Marcus and B rose from Earth, adding new complexity to the cosmic symphony, themes of recognition, of possibility glimpsed but deferred. Of connection that transcended physical constraints. The celestial chamber resonated with their harmonies, changed by the very souls it had sent forth to learn and grow. Movement 3, Chicago, present day. The International Symposium of Black Classical Musicians was in its third day when Dr. Malcolm Rivers took the stage for his keynote address. A world-renowned composer and violinist, his work bridged classical traditions with African diaspora influences, earning him both critical acclaim and commercial success. Music, he began, his voice carrying through the grand hall, his memory made audible. When we play, we channel not just our own experiences, but the collective experiences of all who came before us. Malcolm paused, his prepared notes suddenly forgotten as a strange sensation washed over him. The familiar blue light, which had haunted his dreams since childhood, now flickered at the edges of his vision. He'd learned to hide these episodes well, his therapist had called them stress-induced visual disturbances, but today the sensation was stronger than ever. Focus, he commanded himself. Not now. Not here. We stand at an intersection, he continued, his voice steadying. Between what has been and what could be. Between memory and possibility. Our music serves as the bridge. In the fifth row, Dr. Sophia Laurent sat transfixed. As the head of the Jazz Studies department at Juilliard and an accomplished pianist and cellist, she had respected Malcolm's work from afar for years. But hearing him speak, seeing him in person, something ancient stirred within her. I know him, she thought, though they had never met. I've always known him. Since girlhood, Sophia had been plagued by dreams, dreams of other lives, other times, other instruments in her hands. A cello in a gaslit salon. A piano in a smoky jazz club. And always, always, a man whose face she could never quite remember upon waking, but whose music twined with hers in perfect harmony. Her colleagues attributed her innovative compositions to genius. Only Sophia knew they came from elsewhere, from dreams of blue light and beings who spoke without words. From memories that couldn't possibly be hers, yet felt more real than her waking life. In the celestial chamber, excitement rippled through the gathered beings. At last, Elder Zora intoned, her form expanding with anticipation, the confluence approaches. Both at the height of their powers, both free from the societal constraints that bound them before. The harmony of this age allows what previous times forbade. And the veil? Asked Nexus, his essence pulsing with intensity. Thinner than ever, confirmed Lyra, gesturing toward the mortal realm. Their awareness grows. They have lived with the visions longer, questioned them more deeply. They stand at the threshold of remembrance. Will they retreat again? Worried the younger entity. Watch, Elder Zora replied. They have evolved. The fear remains, but curiosity has grown stronger. As Malcolm continued his speech, he suddenly faltered. In the audience, he had spotted Sophia, and in that moment, flashes of another life, another time, crashed over him. Images of a salon in New Orleans, of a jazz club in Harlem. A garden conversation under moonlight. An alley behind a nightclub. Always the same woman, though her face changed slightly with each vision. The blue light intensified, connecting them across the auditorium. Malcolm saw not just the sophisticated academic in the fifth row, but overlapping images of her past incarnations, and beyond them, a being of pure energy whose essence matched his own. And so, he recovered, his heart racing. We must ask ourselves, what memories do our compositions carry? What ancestral knowledge flows through our fingertips when we play? What forgotten wisdom might we access if we listen not just with our ears, but with our souls? Sophia couldn't tear her eyes away. Around Malcolm's form, she saw not just the man but echoes, a pianist in formal 19th century attire, a trumpet player from the jazz age. And beyond them, something else, something made of blue flame and starlight, watching her with ancient eyes. Later, at the reception, they finally met. Dr. Rivers, Sophia extended her hand, fighting to keep her voice steady. Your speech was profound. I'm Sophia Laurent. The moment their hands touched, blue energy crackled between them, visible only to their eyes. Both gasped, but neither pulled away. The contact sent waves of memory washing over them, not just flashes now, but complete scenes from lives long past. This may sound strange, Malcolm said, not releasing her hand, but have you ever felt like you've lived before? Like you're remembering something that never happened in this lifetime? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Every day of my life, she whispered. I dream of a man playing the piano, of a trumpet in a smoky club, of a love that transcends time. I see blue light that no one else can see. I hear music that hasn't been composed yet. Around them, the room faded away. They saw not the reception hall, but the celestial chamber, the swirling light, the ether beings watching with bated breath. It's as, Malcolm said, his voice filled with awe. We've been here before, many times. And we're finally remembering, Sophia finished, her voice trembling. But what are we remembering? What does it mean? Before Malcolm could answer, reality reasserted itself. The reception hall returned, along with the murmur of conversations and the clink of glasses. Would you join me for coffee tomorrow? He asked, reluctantly releasing her hand. I think we have much to discuss. Yes, she replied simply. I think we've waited quite long enough. Interlude. The veil thins. 2 weeks later. Malcolm's apartment overlooked Lake Michigan, the water reflecting the city lights like scattered stars. Sophia sat beside him on the piano bench, their shoulders touching as they played a duet they had composed together over the past fortnight. It's strange, Malcolm said as the final notes faded. I've never composed with anyone before. I've always been solitary, protective of my creative process. And yet, Sophia replied, her fingers still resting lightly on the keys, writing with you feels like remembering something I've always known. The notes aren't new, they're simply returning. They had spent every day together since the symposium, sharing their dreams, their visions, the strange coincidences that had followed them throughout their lives. With each conversation, each shared memory, the blue light around them had grown stronger, more persistent. When we play together, Malcolm observed, the light intensifies. Have you noticed? Sophia nodded. It's like a doorway opening between here and somewhere else. I've been afraid to tell you, Malcolm confessed, turning to face her. But I don't just dream of the past. I see them, beings of light who watch us, who speak of us as if we're not entirely human. Sophia's eyes widened. You see them too? I thought I was losing my mind. My entire life, doctors have tried to explain away what I see: stress, migraines, overactive imagination. But they've always been there, watching. Waiting. Waiting for what? Malcolm asked softly. For us, I think. For this moment. Sophia reached for his hand. For us to finally stop running from each other. In the celestial chamber, Elder Zora's form brightened. The veil parts further. The time has come. Speak now, and they shall hear. Malcolm, Sophia, children of the dark ether. Both musicians froze, the voice resonating not in their ears but in their minds. Did you hear that? Malcolm whispered. Sophia nodded, her hand tightening around his. Who are you? She called out. We are your true kin, the Council of Ether Beings. You have been among humans for 3 cycles now, learning, growing, creating. But you are not of them. Not of them, Malcolm repeated, confusion and wonder warring in his expression. What does that mean? Look within, remember who you truly are. As if on cue, both Malcolm and Sophia were flooded with visions, not just of their past lives, but beyond them. Of existence as beings of pure energy and consciousness, volunteering to experience humanity through multiple incarnations. They saw their origins in the celestial chamber, their decision to incarnate first in 1832, then in 1925, and now in the present day. They saw their purpose, to bring cosmic harmonies into the mortal realm, to create music that would bridge worlds. Were them, Sophia gasped, blue light now visibly emanating from her skin. These dark ether beings, we chose to come here. To create music, Malcolm added, pieces falling into place. To translate the cosmic symphony into forms humans could comprehend. Yes, and now, in this cycle, you have found each other once more. The time has come to fulfill the final purpose of your incarnations. Which is what? Malcolm asked, though in his heart, he already knew the answer. Union, completion, the continuation of the bloodline. Children born of both realms, who will hear the music of the spheres from birth. The vision faded, leaving them alone in Malcolm's apartment once more, but forever changed, the veil between worlds permanently thinned by their recognition. "Are you afraid?" Sophia asked, seeing the wonder and apprehension in Malcolm's eyes. "Not of this, of us," he replied, drawing her close. "But of what it means. We're not just ourselves anymore. We're part of something vast." "We always were," Sophia said softly. "We just forgot, but the music remembered for us." That night, as they lay together for the first time, the blue light enveloped them completely, their true forms momentarily visible as they merged, not just physically, but spiritually, energetically. Across dimensions, in the celestial chamber, the council witnessed the union with joy, as new harmonies entered the cosmic symphony. Movement 4. Recognition. Spring arrived in Chicago, bringing with it new life and new possibilities. Malcolm and Sophia's relationship had blossomed alongside their musical collaboration, their connection deepening with each passing day. They had learned to communicate with the council, to glimpse the celestial chamber in moments of deep meditation. The knowledge of their true nature had transformed their music, infusing it with cosmic harmonies that moved audiences to tears and ecstasy. Their first collaborative composition, Veil Between Worlds, had stunned critics and listeners alike. One reviewer wrote, "Rivers and Laurent have created something that defies categorization, music that seems to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, that speaks to something ancient and universal within us all." The piece had earned them both acclaim and scrutiny. Colleagues whispered about their rapid partnership, about the intensity between them when they performed. But for Malcolm and Sophia, external opinions had ceased to matter. They lived now in the awareness of their dual nature, both human and other, both mortal and eternal. Tonight, they sat in Malcolm's apartment, the manuscript of their magnum opus, a symphony they had titled, Eternal Convergence, spread before them. "It's finished," Sophia said, a note of awe in her voice as she placed the final sheet on the stack. "I never thought I could create something like this." "We created it," Malcolm corrected gently, his arm around her expanding waistline. "Just as we were always meant to." Sophia was 5 months pregnant with twins, a fact that had delighted the council when they shared the news. "Two bridges between worlds," Elder Zora had said. "The perfect harmony." The pregnancy had brought new awareness of their dual nature. Sophia could now see the blue energy around other people, faint in most, but occasionally strong in certain artists, musicians, and sensitive souls. Others like us, she had realized. Perhaps not full ether beings, but carrying traces of the energy. Malcolm took her hand, leading her to the window. The night sky was unusually clear for Chicago, stars visible despite the city lights. "I've been afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if we fully embrace what we are, what we're meant to be together, we might lose this human experience. These human emotions. I don't want to transcend humanity. I want to bridge it with whatever else we are." "I've been afraid too," Sophia confessed, leaning into him. "In our past lives, that fear kept us apart. The fear of our own power, of going against the world's expectations. But now I wonder, what if our humanity isn't separate from our ether nature? What if it's essential to it? A bridge needs two sides," Malcolm mused. "Perhaps that's why we incarnated, not to escape our ether nature, but to enhance it with human experience. To understand both realms fully." In the celestial chamber, Elder Zora addressed the council. "The convergence approaches. The choice must be made freely." "What choice remains?" asked the younger entity. "They have already united. The choice to fully accept their dual nature," Nexus explained. To commit to raising children who will exist in both realms simultaneously. No small task, even for souls as evolved as theirs. Malcolm turned to Sophia, taking both her hands in his. I loved you in New Orleans, though I never said the words. I loved you in Harlem, though the world wouldn't allow it. And I love you now, both as the man I am and the being I'm remembering myself to be. Tears shimmered in Sophia's eyes, catching the blue light that now permanently surrounded them. I've loved you across time, across lifetimes. I'm tired of waiting for another chance. Then let's make it official, Malcolm said, kneeling before her. Marry me, not just as human custom, but as recognition of what we are to each other across all dimensions. Yes, Sophia answered simply. In this life and beyond. As they kissed, blue energy enveloped them, lifting them inches off the floor. In the celestial chamber, the council rejoiced. The convergence is complete, the bloodline continues. Coda. 7 years later. Malcolm and Sophia Rivers stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, watching with pride as their 6-year-old twins, Elijah and Josephine, prepared for their debut performance. The children were extraordinary by any measure, musically gifted beyond their years, with an intuitive understanding of composition that many adult musicians would envy. But what truly set them apart was invisible to most, the constant blue glow that surrounded them, their ability to see into the celestial realm without effort. Their casual conversations with beings that most humans would never perceive. Are you nervous? Malcolm asked, adjusting his son's bow tie. No, Daddy, Elijah replied, his dark eyes wise beyond his years. They're all here to help us. Who is, sweetheart? Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. The star people, Josephine explained, as if it were obvious. Her small fingers played invisible melodies in the air, leaving trails of blue light. They say our music makes bridges between worlds. Malcolm and Sophia exchanged glances. Since birth, the twins had demonstrated remarkable abilities, perfect pitch, photographic memory, and most significantly, the ability to see the ether beings without effort. Sometimes I think they remember more than we do, Malcolm had commented once, watching the twins conducting elaborate conversations with empty air. They never forgot, Sophia had replied. They were born with the veil already lifted. Raising children who existed in 2 realms simultaneously had brought challenges no parenting book could address. The twins spoke late, but when they did, they sometimes used languages unknown to Earth. They drew pictures of the celestial chamber before they could write their names. And from the moment they could hold instruments, they created music that brought listeners to tears, music that, as one critic put it, seems to open doorways to places we've forgotten but somehow recognize. Elder Zora says we're special because we're both, Elijah continued now, straightening his small shoulders. Human and star person. She says we're the first, added Josephine. But not the last. More children like us will come. We need to show them the way. In the celestial chamber, Elder Zora beamed with pride. The first natural-born hybrids. Their consciousness exists simultaneously in both realms. They do not need to remember, they never forgot. Their music will transform this world, Nexus predicted, his form expanding with satisfaction. And when the time comes, they will guide others of the bloodline who have forgotten their true nature. Already the harmonics of the mortal realm shift, observed Lyra. Listen, can you hear how the music of their world has begun to incorporate our patterns? The bridge grows stronger with each note they play. As the twins took the stage, a hush fell over the audience. When they began to play, Elijah on violin, Josephine on cello, tendrils of blue energy became visible not just to those of ether descent, but to certain sensitive humans in the audience. A young woman in the third row gasped, seeing for the first time the blue light she had glimpsed only in dreams. A composer in the balcony felt melodies stirring in his mind, melodies he had always heard but never understood. A child near the front pointed excitedly at the patterns forming in the air above the stage, while her parents gently shushed her, seeing nothing unusual. The music the twins created was unlike anything heard before, complex yet accessible, revolutionary yet familiar. It spoke of stars and cosmic chambers, of love that transcended time and form, of memory that survived death itself.